Hi, I'm Mark Long, CEO of Neon Machine, the publisher of Shrapnel.
And I'm Clint Bundrick. I'm the creative director on Shrapnel, the game.
For people who have no idea what this game is, kind of give a brief elevator pitch about what this game's all about.
So Shrapnel is a tactical first-person extraction shooter. Internally, we think of it as the ultimate high-stakes treasure hunting experience. It takes place in a world where a meteor narrowly missed the Earth, collided with the moon. The result is that the debris came down, scarred the Earth, and created what was called the Sacrifice Zone. This zone turned out to have incredibly valuable material that was found inside those meteorites, which is called Sigma. And so players play as operators, venturing into that sacrifice to collect Sigma and other gear, and then kind of compete with one another to try to get out with it alive.
Now, where did your team draw inspiration from for the design of the game?
I've been thinking about a game called Shrapnel for so long that it's been like a running joke with my teams. Like, let me guess, it's called Shrapnel. The game is also UGC based, and it comes from a thesis I have watching the last two generation of gamers grow up playing Minecraft and building their own worlds, aging into Roblox, which is kind of like the Legos of game creation. And now with a Fortnite editor, over 50% of the content played by players now is made by other players. But when you get 18 to 35 years old in the core demographic, there's nothing for you to age into. And I think players are ready for that. I think they're ready to be handed the same professional level tools, the Unreal Editor, character creator, potentially in the future when AI is integrated, text to texture, text to mesh, so you'd be able to make your own meshes. And so really the inspiration comes from my love of modding. I used to love to come home from the studio and I would be happy if I got 11 people to play my map, right? Which is ridiculous because during the day I'm making video games for large publishers, but there's just something inherently joyful, I think, about making a game that you love to play your own by being able to mod it.
Yeah, I think the other piece of it, when you think about the evolution of competitive shooters, from Unreal to Call of Duty, suddenly has leveling and progression, things that players are working on long term, to Battle Royale, where it's single life, you die, you're out, and now to extraction shooters. I also think about it as stakes. This feeling that choices have major consequences, that you're operating players' kind of choice to make about how much risk they actually want to take. We talk about it in Shrapnel, where the players collected a bunch of Sigma, maybe they found a legendary weapon, a fragment for a weapon skin, and they really should be out on that next dropship. But suddenly this giant storm comes in on the horizon, this building gets lit up, and the player suddenly knows there's probably more legendary gear in that, and we're always tempting them to take those bigger risks. For me, so much of that is about the stakes and the kind of really interesting player stories that come out of those stakes. So I think that's been part of the evolution towards extraction, and that's really what we are playing with as well. Again, why we think of it as the ultimate high stakes treasure hunting experience. That's what we want it to feel like when the player's actually in the sacrifice zone.
Now, Mark, you talked about wanting this user generated experience with meshes and maps. I can't tell you how many people work for AAA studios now that started modding maps in Doom and Quake and now are AAA huge names in the industry. Can you elaborate more on where you think user-generated content will go and how your game will kind of take a different approach to that?
Hopefully I consider myself in that AAA category, but I'm exactly one of those guys. That's where I came from in the game industry, modding Half-Life 2, America's Army, all the way up to GTA. It's just fun, right? Well, this is where Web3 comes in. You can build all this content, but you don't really have a community if the community can't benefit, share in that. And so when we look at Web3 or blockchain, we weren't looking at these egregious Ponzi schemes, where they're not really games. They're just a way to, try and make money from low wage earners in other parts of the world, like Philippines. So instead, we looked at what could this technology do? And the one thing that it could do that's most powerful is it's basically a free, frictionless database that allows for attribution. So for example, let's say the three of us form a clan and we start working on this map, and our map becomes really popular with other players. That map is actually an NFT, and our wallets are tied to it. So when other players play it, we get a percentage of revenue share from the company. And then if I'm a different kind of creator, if I make meshes, let's say I make a cool exploding barrel everybody loves to put in their map, then I get that attribution as a subcomponent of the map. Another thing, a novel thing that Web3 could do is discovery. Think about Roblox. It has this discovery problem. Like there's, hundreds of millions of kids play a month, and they've made millions of games. But the truth is, the kids only play like 3 to 5 of the same games over and over again. And part of the problem is there's no mechanism for me as a kid to promote my game, my content. So with Web3, you can do a thing called staking. Let's say, again, we love some other clan's map. They're like, dude, this map's amazing. I wish more people knew about it. Then you can stake your tokens against that map and curate content within the community, and then also get revenue share. And so in this real interesting way, if you start thinking about how attribution can reward the community, it aligns a community that normally can turn, because these games are so competitive, they can actually turn toxic. From the very beginning, from the ground up, it's aligning the community in the same direction, and that's why we love it. But I also want to acknowledge, why players are up in arms against blockchain. And I believe it's because the early publishers that tried to introduce it, Ubisoft in particular, is just trying to cram this idea down their throat. Like, I bought a premium game, and then you make me buy DLC to keep up with the seasons. And now you want me to buy a pair of pants after I grind, 60 hours for them? Like, it feels like overreach. And on top of that, if you're just not, what we call a degen, a crypto bro, you don't get why people are paying $50,000 for a monkey picture, right? It just doesn't make sense to you. But I think Web3 it basically enables digital ownership that's frictionless, so that players can finally participate in the economy and also actually own, what they bought. What did World of Warcraft announce yesterday? That you're never going to own any of the content that they sell you. Their new EULA just says, screw you. If we decide to shut down this part of the world, all that stuff evaporates. That's not right. I'd like to think back to the days when, you got in your car and you drove to GameStop and you traded in a couple of PlayStation discs for a new game. And, maybe they give you $15 for 3 discs and then turned around and sold them for $20 each. But still, I was happy with that transaction. I got something of value for the things that I own. But with all this free-to-play and in-app purchase, that's gone away. And I think blockchain could bring it back again.
Do you feel that the younger generation, like Gen Z or even like Gen Y, do you think they'll be more understanding about like owning something that's digital rather than physical and having that tie into a marketplace, even though it doesn't physically exist in the real space?
Kara Swisher said famously late in the 90s, everything that can be digitized will be digitized. And she's right? We've watched the digital transformation occur. I want to say, maybe stupidly and boldly, everything that can be tokenized will be tokenized, because you'll own that. As the economy shifts to digital, doesn't that make sense? It doesn't make sense that major publishers own everything that I paid for in a game. I should be able to own that. But there's no real mechanism for them to provide that attribution, and that's what blockchain does, and it does it really, really well. On the other hand, in our game, if you don't want to play Web3 style, you don't have to. This will be a free-to-play game next year, like any other free-to-play game. But to encourage players to own, we're going to send you push notifications after you get better and better at Shrapnel, and maybe you've collected $20, $40, $60 worth of gear and Sigma from other players. We'll say, hey, dude, if you just would create a wallet, we'll give this to you, and you can do whatever you want with it. It's actually worth real money. So you could cash out, or you could take it to another Web3 game, or you could buy more stuff in our game. And I think that's how you win Web2 players over, not by trying to cram blockchain down their throat or putting up a requirement to create a wallet before you even get to play the game.
Now, Clint, like you're in extraction first-person shooters. What are some of the challenges when designing a shooting game in 2024, and what tools do you use to kind of stand out amongst the other plethora of shooters out in the market?
Yeah, I mean, it's the shooter genre obviously is one of the most popular, and so there's lots of competition in the space. So for us, UGC obviously a big part of that, and for me, that's not just about the economics of it. It is about the way, if you allow your community to create content, in many ways they influence the direction of the game, right? We're not just talking about maps, we're talking about the community being able to make weapon skins and skins for their characters. In many ways, we are almost sharing ownership of the game itself with the community. In a way that I don't think you're seeing a lot, particularly kind of AAA shooters. And so I'm fascinated to see kind of how that evolves. And then on the other end, like I said, a lot of it for us is that sort of that stakes, like I always take inspiration from other genres and then want to bring them into a new one, right? So how do we take some of the inspiration, whether it's RPG mechanics, whether it is about that sort of like high stakes feeling you get in other genres, and bring that into it as an extraction shooter, and then give the player a ton of agency. I come from an immersive sim background, the kind of ultimate say yes to the player genre. So I always want to bring that in as part of this as well, so that you have players coming into the space and having almost what we think of it as cross motivational play, in that way of some players are they're going to play stealth, they're going to nibble around the edges, they're going to scavenge some items, and they're going to be out on the first dropship. Others are going to bring in their best gear, they're going to be there all the way until the end game because they know that's where the most valuable loot shows up, and they're going to basically risk everything to get the most valuable stuff, or they're going to die trying. And the more you get those sorts of players playing in the same space, the more you get almost those sort of like organic co-op moments, in a way where players are suddenly looking at one another and they're deciding whether they're going to engage or go their own way, or people suddenly start working together. Like, I love the way that systems can bring players together in a way that is not the designer telling the player how to play. We create the environment and then empower them to make their own choices, but they'll also own the consequences of those choices.
Now, your game is in alpha now. Are you guys planning for a console release at some point? Are you guys planning on supporting crossplay? And if you do, as a follow-up to that, are you able to transfer what you own to like another account? If I play on Xbox, I want to jump to PC, can I share everything I've earned?
We'd love to be on console, but the console ecosystems are just beginning to experiment. In many ways, for me, it's a recapitulation of the free-to-play experience. I published one of the first free-to-play games on Xbox called Blacklight. And when I first talked to Xbox, they were like, look, dude, we can handle like DLC kind of transactions, but we can't handle the kind of volume and tempo of in-app purchases that you're talking about. But we'd love to coordinate with you. We'd love to learn how to do that. So it took another 1.5 years for them to add those kind of capabilities to the ecosystem. I think they're well aware of the potential of Web3 and are planning for that integration. But I don't think you'll see it until the SEC regulates crypto. They just, as a publicly held company, they'll do some kind of workaround, perhaps where you can play the game free to play, but if you try and spend any crypto money, Xbox Live won't allow you to do that. But once they've adopted it, and we all feel confident they will eventually, then yes, you'll see crossplay, and yes, that's the promise of blockchain. It's all completely interoperable. I actually, when I talked about taking disc, to GameStop, what I think happens is, let's pretend it's 5-7 years in the future, and there's a large number of games that are popular that are blockchain. Maybe I'm tired of Shrapnel, and I'll take this kind of box of NFT Legos, like gear, weapons, suppressors, stocks, and I'll just dump them into a marketplace like a coin machine. And then I'll get all my money out, and then I can take that, that crypto over to another game. I think we're in kind of the early era. It's comparable to early internet, when it's like we're talking about HTTP protocol, when we talk about these change. And today, you don't even think about, how any of that work. It doesn't make any difference to you what network you're on. And I think the same will be true in blockchain. It'll be just completely transparent to you, and it'll just work.
Yeah, and I think this goes to a point Mark made earlier. Like culturally, we are very much a game first. Like I don't think we compete for people's money. We compete for their time. So many great, but whether it's books or film or TV or other games, there's so many things now competing for our time. Incredibly high quality things that are worth spending your time on. That we have to prove to somebody why they should spend time in the world of Shrapnel over another. And that has nothing to do with blockchain or anything else. That has to do with the core game experience. If that's not good enough, nothing else matters. And so to Mark's point as well, like if somebody who's not interested in the Web3 stuff, like they can just come play a great extraction shooter. They can come create content. They can come do whatever they want. And then if folks want to engage deeper in that experience, or yeah, they've unlocked a skin and now they've got multiple of them, and they want to throw it on the marketplace and get some of the money back that they can move it somewhere else. Like those are all things they'll be able to do, but we're not designing a game that is all about the economic engine. We are designing a game that's about entertaining players, and then we want to attach creator economies and other things to it that allow people to share in the success. Because if you make the next great map in Shrapnel, or you make the next great weapon skin that everybody wants, of course you should share in the profits of that.
And Clint, what do you think is the biggest misconception about being a creative director in game development in 2024?
I actually don't know if it's changed that much in terms of the misconceptions. Ultimately, I think the biggest misconception about game development in general is that people think it's about the idea, and they think it is about like being the idea machine, and it's not. It's never actually that. I think for a creative director, so much of what you do is filter and prioritize. Like, inspire with a big direction, establish guardrails, and then let all the millions of ideas come at you. They'll come from everywhere, especially with the way we're developing out in public with an engaged community. You know, we just ran STX2 and I got like a 9-page dissertation from somebody in our community about gun feel, right? Like that sort of stuff I love. And so a lot of being a creative director is about like, which problems are we solving now? How do we actually solve those? So you start with the big vision, but it is a lot of like managing the flow of ideas and prioritization rather than the one at the front of the room going, I think that should be red instead of black. Like that's not the actual job. That sounds like a fun job, but that's definitely not my job. But I think outside looking at a lot of people, it makes sense. The industry is very much a black box, right? We keep things very secret. And that's another thing that Shrapnel's kind of breaking down those walls a bit and helping people even get educated on how games get made. But I think that's a lot of it is the like, you just play games all day, and then is the this all about the idea. Somebody I worked with once used to say like, we don't ship ideas, we ship experiences, which is basically like where the idea meets the technology, meets the team's ability to execute on it. I always liked that lens on it. I think that's the actual job.
And then Mark, for you, what do you think is the biggest misconception of being a CEO of a company in the gaming space?
Yeah, that I'm actually in charge of anything.
Right.
You know, I'm in charge of a circus full of monkeys, and just trying to keep them from killing each other is half of my job. Being the head of a creative endeavor like this in so many disciplines, for me, the one epiphany I had years ago was that I needed to learn to speak the grammar of each one of these disciplines. And I learned that when I got a big enough budget to do an orchestral score, and I was working with our in-house composer and sound designer. He was like, Mark, what do you want to do? It was like, oh my God, I've always wanted to do an orchestral. I love Hans Zimmer. And he says, everybody loves Hans Zimmer, man. Like, what do you mean by that? And in our dialogue, I realized I just didn't have the grammar to describe music. So I went off and read a little bit about that. And then I was able to come back and, you know, say what legato means, or, you know, these Italian words. And then I applied that to other disciplines. So to a 3D artist, instead of him saying, you know, what do you think of this dumpster that I made? I'm a prop artist. I'm trying to make the best dumpster ever. I can say, well, your color component's off from the rest of the environment. You need to turn down the specularity, and your diffuse map or bump map is way too high as well. It's just too shiny. And that kind of precise feedback as a producer is really useful to every single discipline. So it's really learning to speak all the languages that are spoken in the studio that I think will make you a successful CEO.
So your game is in alpha now. Where can people go to find more information about Shrapnel and sign up for your alpha and get updates? Discord, website, social media?
Yes, we're on the Epic Game Store now. Shrapnel.com is the best place to get started. We have a Discord channel and a Twitter